My friends, there is a battle taking place in the unseen realm, a battle for our peace, our purpose, and our relationships. You see, the enemy doesn't always show up in ways we expect. Sometimes the struggle you're facing isn't coming from outside your circle. It's happening right within your home, your friendships, and even your family. I'm not saying to look at your loved ones as enemies, hear me clearly, but there are times when the forces of darkness work through people closest to us, not because they're evil, but because they've left the door open for negative influences to creep in. That's why we must learn to discern the signs. Behavioral manipulation is one of the most subtle yet powerful ways that darkness can infiltrate relationships, often causing harm without immediate detection. Manipulation is not always overt. It doesn't always come with a loud voice or obvious actions. Instead, it can creep in quietly, weaving its way into the fibers of everyday interactions. It thrives in subtlety, often disguised as care or concern. However, its true nature is control and need to dominate or influence another person's emotions, decisions, and ultimately their freedom. When manipulation begins to surface in the behavior of someone you love, it's not just a relational issue, it can signify a deeper spiritual problem. Those who manipulate often twist the truth to suit their agenda. They may use words, situations, or even silence as tools to bend others to their will. It might look like guilt tripping you for setting healthy boundaries or twisting your words to make you question your own judgment. The essence of manipulation is distortion, distorting facts, emotions, and perceptions to create confusion. And where there is confusion, there is room for destruction. Remember, God is not the author of confusion, but of clarity, peace, and order. When manipulation is present, it challenges the natural order of healthy relationships. Manipulation often hides behind good intentions. It may appear as if the person is simply trying to protect you or guide you. They may even convince themselves that their actions are for your benefit. But when their behavior leaves you feeling controlled, silenced, or devalued, it's a clear indication that something is not right. A person operating under the influence of manipulation rarely seeks your well-being. They seek to satisfy their own needs, often at your expense. The enemy thrives in selfishness, and manipulation is one of his most effective tools. Relationships built on manipulation do not foster growth. Instead, they hinder it. When someone you love uses manipulation, they create an environment where trust is eroded and fear takes its place. Fear of disappointing them. Fear of standing up for yourself. Fear of what might happen if you don't comply with their wishes. This fear is not from God, for He gives us a spirit, power, love, and a sound mind. Manipulation seeks to rob you of these gifts, replacing them with doubt, insecurity, and anxiety. Sometimes manipulation goes beyond personal interactions and extends into communal dynamics. A manipulative person can divide families, friendships, and communities by pitting one person against another. They may use whispered words, half-truths, or outright lies to create tension and mistrust among others. This divisiveness is a hallmark of spiritual interference because unity is the foundation of strength in any relationship or community. Where there is division, the enemy has a foothold. The most dangerous aspect of manipulation is how easily it can be overlooked, because it often masquerades as care or concern. It may take time to recognize it for what it truly is. You may find yourself questioning whether you're overreacting, whether their intentions are genuine, or whether you're imagining the harm. This confusion is not coincidental, it is deliberate. Manipulation thrives in uncertainty. It seeks to keep you second-guessing yourself and your instincts, making it easier for the manipulator to maintain control. When faced with manipulation, it is crucial to remember that love is not controlling. Love does not demand its own way. It does not manipulate or deceive. True love empowers, liberates, and brings peace. If someone you love is engaging in manipulative behavior, it is essential to address it with both truth and grace. Recognizing manipulation is the first step toward breaking its power. This may require setting firm boundaries, seeking wise counsel, and most importantly, praying for discernment and strength. Behavioral manipulation is not just a personality flaw, it's a symptom of a deeper issue that must be addressed. The person manipulating may not even fully realize the harm they're causing, as they too may be under the influence of forces they don't understand. This is why spiritual awareness is so critical. The battle is not against flesh and blood, but against unseen forces. Emotional turmoil is one of the most telling signs that something deeper and darker may be at work in the relationships you hold dear. When a loved one consistently brings chaos into your life, leaving you anxious, unsettled, or emotionally drained, it's not just a personality trait or a bad habit. Emotional turmoil can be a direct indicator of spiritual interference. It manifests in the way their presence disrupts the peace within you, turning what should be moments of joy and connection into experiences of stress, confusion, and unrest. The atmosphere a person carries with them is often a reflection of their inner state. When someone is battling internal unrest, whether they're aware of it or not, that unrest doesn't stay contained. It spills over into their interactions, their words in their relationships. This constant state of emotional upheaval can create a ripple effect affecting everyone around them. If you've ever walked into a room and instantly felt a heavy tension when a certain person was present, you've experienced this phenomenon. It's as if their very presence carries a weight that presses down on the atmosphere. This emotional disruption is not accidental. It is a tactic that the enemy uses to keep people bound and disconnected from God's peace. God's presence is marked by peace, love, and soundness of mind. On the other hand, the enemy thrives in environments of fear, anxiety, and discord. When someone you love brings a constant storm into your life, it can be a sign that they are unknowingly carrying burdens or influences that are not of God. This isn't about blaming them. It's about recognizing the spiritual reality behind the emotional impact they have on others. One of the most challenging aspects of dealing with emotional turmoil caused by someone you love is the toll it takes on your own well-being. You may find yourself walking on eggshells, constantly trying to avoid triggering their anger, sadness, or frustration. Their emotional instability might leave you feeling as though you're constantly putting out fires, unable to rest or find peace. Over time, this can lead to emotional exhaustion, making it harder for you to focus on your own spiritual and personal growth. The enemy uses this emotional chaos as a distraction. If he can keep you preoccupied with managing someone else's turmoil, he can pull your focus away from your purpose and your relationship with God. Emotional turmoil becomes a smokescreen, clouding your ability to see clearly and hear from God. It's not just a personal issue, it's a spiritual battle designed to disrupt your connection to divine peace. Often the loved one causing this turmoil isn't fully aware of the impact they're having. They may be carrying their own pain, trauma, or spiritual battles that they have not yet addressed. Their actions and reactions may come from a place of unresolved hurt or insecurity, which the enemy exploits to create division and confusion. Recognizing this doesn't mean excusing their behavior, but it does mean approaching the situation with compassion and discernment. In many cases, emotional turmoil manifests in cycles. You may experience moments of calm only to be thrown back into chaos without warning. This cyclical nature is another sign of spiritual interference. God's peace is steady and unchanging, while the enemy operates in instability and unpredictability. When you find yourself trapped in this cycle, it's important to seek God's guidance to break it. Pray for wisdom to understand what's truly happening, and ask for the strength to confront the issue with love and firmness. Addressing emotional turmoil caused by a loved one requires more than just practical solutions. It requires spiritual intervention. Pray not only for yourself, but also for the person causing the chaos. Ask God to reveal what's behind their behavior and to bring healing and deliverance into their life. Speak peace into your environment and declare God's authority over the emotional atmosphere in your home and relationships. Above all, remember that God has called you to live in peace. Emotional turmoil is not your portion, and you have the authority to stand against it. Whether through setting boundaries, seeking wise counsel, or engaging in consistent prayer, take steps to protect your peace while trusting God to work in the lives of those you love. Emotional storms may rage, but the power of God's peace can calm even the most turbulent seas. Spiritual disconnection is a subtle but powerful indicator that something is not right within a relationship. When someone you love begins to pull you away from your faith, discourages your spiritual growth, or causes you to question the foundational truths that anchor your life, it's not merely a difference of perspective, it's a signal of a deeper spiritual issue at work. This disconnection may not always appear intentional or malicious. It can manifest through actions, attitudes, or even subtle suggestions that lead you away from the path of spiritual alignment with God. Recognizing this requires discernment, as the pull away from faith can be gradual and cloaked in what seems like care or reason. A person who fosters spiritual disconnection may ridicule or downplay the importance of your relationship with God. They might dismiss your prayer life as unnecessary, mock your desire to study Scripture, or even suggest that your faith is outdated or irrelevant. While they may claim to have your best interests at heart, their actions often serve to isolate you from the source of your strength and guidance. It's important to remember that faith is the foundation of who you are, and anything or anyone that seeks to diminish that foundation is ultimately working against your purpose. One of the most subtle ways spiritual disconnection can occur is through distraction. A loved one might not directly challenge your beliefs, but they may fill your time with activities, conversations, or commitments that leave little room for spiritual practices. Over time, the busyness they create can lead to neglect of prayer, worship, and time spent in God's presence. This distraction is not always intentional, but its impact is undeniable. When your focus shifts from God to the demands or desires of someone else, spiritual disconnection begins to take root. In some cases, the person causing this disconnection might themselves be struggling with their faith or harboring unresolved spiritual wounds. Their own doubts or frustrations can spill over into your life, creating an atmosphere of skepticism or resistance toward God. They may not recognize how their attitudes or words are influencing you, but their inner turmoil can have a profound effect on your spiritual walk. This is why it is so important to guard your heart and remain vigilant about the voices and influences you allow into your life. Spiritual disconnection can also manifest in the form of discouragement. A loved one may constantly highlight the challenges, failures, or unanswered prayers in your life, causing you to question God's goodness or His presence. They might frame their words as concern or practicality, but the underlying effect is to chip away at your faith. The enemy uses discouragement to plant seeds of doubt, and those seeds, if left unchecked, can grow into a sense of distance from God. What makes spiritual disconnection so dangerous is that it often feels justified. The person pulling you away might use logic, emotion, or even your own struggles to make their case. They might appeal to your love for them, asking you to prioritize them over your faith, or they might argue that your devotion to God is causing strain in the relationship. This kind of manipulation can be hard to recognize, especially when it comes from someone you care deeply about. Addressing spiritual disconnection requires a firm but loving response. The first step is to recognize what's happening. Pay attention to how your relationship with this person affects your relationship with God. Do you feel encouraged, supported, and strengthened in your faith, or do you feel drained, doubtful, and disconnected? Once you've identified the impact, take steps to protect your spiritual life. This might mean setting boundaries, carving out dedicated time for prayer and worship, or seeking counsel from trusted spiritual mentors. It's also crucial to pray for the person causing the disconnection. Ask God to reveal himself to them in a powerful way and to heal any wounds or doubts they may be carrying. Remember, the battle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces. Your loved one is not the enemy. They are a vessel that may be unknowingly influenced by forces that seek to disrupt your faith. Finally, trust in God's power to restore and realign your spiritual priorities. He is faithful to guide you back into his presence. No matter how far you've drifted, stand firm in your faith and let the light of your relationship with God shine brightly, even in the face of resistance. Spiritual disconnection may challenge you, but with God's help, it can also strengthen your resolve to remain rooted in him. Negative influences are among the most insidious ways that darkness can infiltrate your life through the people you hold dear. When someone you love begins to introduce you to toxic environments, harmful habits, or destructive patterns, it is often more than just a poor choice on their part. It is a spiritual issue with serious implications. These influences can come in many forms: subtle shifts in behavior, casual invitations to compromise your values, or even overt pressure to engage in actions that go against your principles. What starts as a small detour can quickly become a major deviation from your purpose and calling. Recognizing these influences is critical because the enemy often disguises harm as harmless fun or freedom. At first, these influences may seem innocent. It could be a suggestion to join in activities that, while not overtly sinful, begin to pull you away from your commitments, your standards, or your spiritual growth. Over time, these small compromises accumulate, creating a distance between you and the path God has set for you. The enemy rarely attacks outright. Instead, he erodes your foundation little by little, using those closest to you to plant seeds of doubt, distraction, or disobedience. Negative influences are most effective when they come from people you trust, because their words and actions carry more weight in your life. A loved one who brings negative influences might not even realize the role they are playing. They may themselves be caught in cycles of sin, pain, or spiritual blindness, unintentionally inviting you into the same patterns. Perhaps they have grown accustomed to environments or behaviors that are contrary to God's design and now see them as normal or acceptable. Their intentions may not be malicious, but their impact can still be devastating. It's crucial to understand that while you can empathize with their struggles, you must also guard your own heart and remain steadfast in your convictions. Negative influences often come disguised as opportunities for connection or enjoyment. A loved one might encourage you to participate in activities that seem harmless at first glance, but ultimately lead you away from God's will. For example, they might suggest entertainment that glorifies immorality, relationships that compromise your values, or habits that distract you from your purpose. These influences are like bait in a trap. They appeal to your desires or your longing for acceptance, but they ultimately ensnare you in situations that weaken your faith and damage your spirit. One of the most dangerous aspects of negative influences is their ability to normalize sin. When you are consistently exposed to harmful environments or behaviors, your sensitivity to their impact begins to dull. What once would have caused you to pause or pray might become something you barely notice. This gradual desensitization is a tactic of the enemy who seeks to make sin appear ordinary and acceptable. When sin becomes normalized, it becomes easier to justify actions or attitudes that are out of alignment with God's word. The ripple effects of negative influences are not limited to your personal life. They can affect your relationships, your decisions, and even your spiritual legacy. When someone you love introduces negativity into your life, it can create division in your family, disrupt your peace, and hinder your ability to be a light to others. The enemy's goal is not only to distract or destroy you, but also to use you as a vessel to spread that same negativity to others. This is why it is so important to recognize and address these influences before they take root. Dealing with negative influences from a loved one requires both courage and wisdom. It's not enough to simply avoid the harmful environments or behaviors. You must also confront the underlying spiritual issue. Begin by seeking God's guidance in prayer, asking Him to reveal the true nature of the influence and to give you the strength to respond appropriately. Pray for the person involved, asking God to work in their heart and bring them to a place of healing and transformation. Setting boundaries is a necessary part of protecting yourself from negative influences. This does not mean abandoning your loved one, but rather creating space that allows you to maintain your spiritual integrity while still loving them. Communicate your concerns with clarity and compassion, making it clear that your decision to step back is not a rejection of them, but a commitment to your faith and well-being. Finally, surround yourself with positive influences that uplift and encourage you in your walk with God. Seek out relationships and environments that align with His purpose for your life. Negative influences may come through the people you care about, but with discernment, prayer, and the power of the Holy Spirit, you can resist their pull and remain steadfast in the calling God has placed on your life. Always remember, you are called to be a light in the darkness, not to let the darkness dim your light. Consistent patterns of division and conflict within relationships are strong indicators of a deeper, often spiritual issue at work. When someone you love seems to bring discord into your life, whether through arguments, misunderstandings, or an inability to foster harmony, it's rarely just a coincidence or a personality quirk. Instead, it can be a sign of spiritual forces seeking to disrupt unity and peace. Division is one of the enemy's most effective tools because it weakens relationships, isolates individuals, and creates fertile ground for bitterness, resentment, and despair to grow. Recognizing these patterns is essential for protecting both your relationships and your spiritual well-being. Conflict in relationships is inevitable because we are imperfect people. However, when disagreements escalate into consistent patterns of strife, it goes beyond the natural dynamics of human interaction. Patterns of division often reveal themselves in cycles. Small disagreements quickly spiral into major arguments, or unresolved issues linger, creating tension that never fully dissipates. The enemy thrives in this tension, using it to sow seeds of mistrust and disconnection. Where there is unity, there is strength, and the enemy's goal is to dismantle that strength by turning loved ones against each other. Division often starts subtly. It might begin with a misunderstanding that goes unaddressed or a slight offense that is left to fester. Over time, these small cracks in the foundation of the relationship grow into larger fractures. The person causing division may not even realize their role in the process. They might carry unresolved anger, jealousy, or insecurity that influences their interactions, leading to unnecessary conflict. These underlying issues can become spiritual strongholds, giving the enemy a foothold in their life and by extension in yours. One of the most destructive aspects of division is its ability to distort perceptions. When conflict is consistent, it becomes harder to see the other person clearly. Instead of viewing them as someone you love, you might begin to see them only through the lens of the tension they bring. This distortion creates further separation, making reconciliation and healing even more difficult. The enemy uses division to blind us to the truth of who we are and who our loved ones are. He wants us to forget that we are called to love, forgive, and seek unity. Division doesn't only affect the relationship in question, its effects ripple outward, impacting other areas of life. Persistent conflict can drain emotional energy, leaving you feeling exhausted and unable to focus on your purpose. It can also create an atmosphere of negativity that affects your interactions with others, your work, and even your physical health. The enemy's aim is not just to create temporary discord, but to establish a long-term disruption that undermines your peace, joy, and effectiveness. Recognizing patterns of division requires spiritual discernment. It's important to distinguish between normal relational challenges and consistent, spiritually driven conflict. Ask yourself, is this tension persistent and unresolved? Does it feel as though there's a barrier preventing genuine reconciliation? Do you sense that the conflict is affecting your ability to grow spiritually or fulfill your calling? If the answers to these questions point to a deeper issue, it's time to address the problem with both prayer and action. Breaking patterns of division begins with humility and self-examination. While it's easy to focus on the other person's role in the conflict, it's important to ask God to search your own heart and reveal any attitudes, behaviors, or wounds that might be contributing to the division. This self-awareness allows you to approach the situation with a spirit of grace and truth rather than blame or defensiveness. Prayer is a powerful weapon against division. Pray not only for yourself, but also for the person involved. Ask God to heal their heart, bring clarity to their mind, and remove any spiritual influences that might be driving the conflict. Pray for wisdom in how to address the issue and for the courage to take the necessary steps toward reconciliation. Sometimes addressing division requires setting boundaries. This doesn't mean cutting off the relationship, but rather creating space to protect your peace and allow for reflection and healing. To communicate openly and honestly about the impact of the conflict, expressing your desire for unity and your willingness to work toward it. Be patient, understanding that healing takes time and that change often comes gradually. Above all, remember that God's desire is for unity, not division. He calls us to be peacemakers, to forgive as we have been forgiven, and to love as He loves us. Patterns of division may seem overwhelming, but with God's guidance and the power of His Spirit, you can overcome them. Trust that He is at work in the situation and remain steadfast in your commitment to pursue peace, even in the face of ongoing conflict. Division may come, but it does not have to remain. Through faith, prayer, and intentional action, unity can be restored and the bond of love strengthened. A persistent atmosphere of fear or oppression within a relationship is one of the clearest signs that a spiritual battle is taking place. When someone you love instills fear, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it often signals the presence of forces working to disrupt peace and suppress your spiritual freedom. This fear may not always be overt or obvious. It can manifest as a subtle but constant unease, a sense of walking on eggshells, or a pervasive feeling that you are not free to be yourself in their presence. Recognizing and addressing this atmosphere is essential because fear is one of the enemy's most powerful tools to control, isolate, and weaken the spirit. Fear and oppression are not from God. Scripture tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. When fear takes hold in a relationship, it is a distortion of the love and peace God intends for us to experience. Fear and love cannot coexist. Where fear dominates, love is suppressed, and the natural flow of trust, openness, and joy is interrupted. The presence of fear is often a sign that spiritual forces are attempting to undermine the very essence of what God desires for your relationships: mutual respect, support, and encouragement. This atmosphere of fear can take many forms. It may arise through manipulation, where a loved one uses guilt, shame, or emotional blackmail to control your actions. It may appear as verbal or emotional abuse, where words are used as weapons to tear you down rather than build you up. In some cases, it might involve an unspoken dynamic where their moods, reactions, or silence hold you captive, leaving you constantly guessing how to avoid their disapproval. These tactics are not merely behavioral issues, they are spiritual strategies meant to rob you of your confidence, your peace, and your connection to God. Oppression often goes hand in hand with fear. It creates a heaviness in the relationship, a sense that you are burdened or restricted in ways that go beyond normal relational dynamics. This oppression may show up as constant criticism, where nothing you do seems good enough, or as a refusal to acknowledge your worth and contributions. Over time, this can erode your sense of identity, making you doubt your value and purpose. Oppression doesn't just affect your emotions, it seeps into your spirit, creating barriers between you and the freedom that comes from walking in God's truth. The enemy uses fear and oppression to isolate you. When you are caught in a relationship dominated by these dynamics, you may feel cut off from others, hesitant to seek help, or even ashamed to admit what you are experiencing. Isolation is a tactic to keep you in a place of vulnerability, where the lies of the enemy can take root. The more isolated you feel, the harder it becomes to recognize the truth of your situation and the resources available to you through God's power and the support of a healthy community. Addressing an atmosphere of fear and oppression begins with acknowledging its presence. Denial or minimizing the issue only allows it to persist. Pay attention to how you feel when you are with this person. Do you feel anxious, small, or unworthy? Do you sense a heaviness in your spirit that lingers even after the interaction is over? These feelings are not random, they are signals that something deeper is at work. Trust these signals as invitations to seek God's guidance and clarity. Prayer is your greatest weapon against fear and oppression. Pray for wisdom to see the situation clearly and for strength to confront it with grace and courage. Ask God to reveal the spiritual roots of the issue, whether they lie within the other person, within yourself, or within the dynamic between you. Pray also for the person involved, asking God to bring healing, deliverance, and restoration to their heart and mind. In some cases, addressing fear and oppression requires taking practical steps to protect yourself. This might mean setting boundaries to limit the influence of this person in your life, seeking counsel from trusted mentors or spiritual leaders, or even removing yourself from the relationship if it is causing harm to your well-being. These steps are not acts of rebellion, but of obedience to God's call to live in freedom and peace. Above all, remember that fear and oppression do not have the final say. God has given you authority through Christ to stand against these forces and reclaim the peace and freedom that are rightfully yours. You are not powerless in the face of fear. You are empowered by the Spirit of God who dwells within you and equips you for victory. Stand firm in this truth and trust that as you take steps toward healing and restoration, God will guide you, protect you, and lead you into the abundant life He has promised. Fear and oppression may try to hold you back, but God's love and power are greater, breaking every chain and bringing light to even the darkest places. A lack of accountability in someone you love can be a strong indication that something deeper is at play, possibly even a spiritual issue. Accountability is the willingness to accept responsibility for one's actions, words, and choices. It is the foundation of trust, integrity, and growth in any relationship. When someone avoids accountability, consistently shifts blame, or refuses to acknowledge their role in conflicts or challenges, it creates an atmosphere of instability and dysfunction. This behavior is not just a relational issue, but often a sign of spiritual resistance, as accountability aligns us with truth, humility, and the ability to grow closer to God. Avoidance of accountability often begins subtly. It might manifest as small excuses for bad behavior, justifications for hurtful words, or a tendency to deflect blame onto others. Over time, these small actions can grow into a pattern of complete avoidance, where the person refuses to confront their own shortcomings and instead focuses on the perceived faults of others. This pattern is dangerous because it creates a cycle of denial that prevents real change and healing. When someone is unwilling to be accountable, they close the door to growth, both in their personal life and in their relationship with God. This lack of accountability can also serve as a shield for deeper spiritual struggles. When a person refuses to take responsibility, it often stems from fear, pride, or a sense of shame. They may fear judgment or rejection if they admit their mistakes. They might struggle with pride, unable to accept the vulnerability that comes with acknowledging imperfection. Or they may carry deep wounds that make it difficult for them to face the truth about themselves. These internal struggles can become spiritual strongholds, allowing the enemy to keep them trapped in cycles of denial and deflection. The impact of a lack of accountability extends beyond the individual. In a relationship, it creates an uneven dynamic where one person is left carrying the emotional and spiritual weight that the other refuses to acknowledge. This imbalance can lead to resentment, frustration, and a breakdown in communication. Without accountability, conflicts remain unresolved, trust erodes, and the relationship becomes a breeding ground for further misunderstandings and pain. The enemy thrives in this chaos, using it to sow division and hinder the spiritual growth of everyone involved. A lack of accountability also stifles reconciliation and healing. When someone refuses to admit their role in a situation, it becomes nearly impossible to move forward in a healthy way. Apologies, forgiveness, and restoration all require a foundation of honesty and humility. Without accountability, these essential elements of healing remain out of reach, leaving wounds unhealed and relationships fractured. This not only affects the current dynamic, but can also have lasting effects on future relationships and the overall emotional and spiritual health of everyone involved. Recognizing a lack of accountability requires discernment. It's important to distinguish between someone who is struggling with occasional lapses in judgment and someone who consistently avoids responsibility. Look for patterns. Do they often blame others for their mistakes? Are they quick to justify their actions instead of owning up to them? Do they resist feedback or react defensively when confronted with their behavior? These patterns are red flags that accountability is lacking and that deeper issues may be at work. Addressing a lack of accountability begins with prayer and self-reflection. Before confronting the person, ask God for wisdom, patience, and clarity. Pray for their heart to be softened and their spirit to be open to truth. Examine your own heart as well, ensuring that your motives are pure and rooted in a desire for healing and growth rather than judgment or retaliation. This spiritual preparation is essential for approaching the situation with grace and humility. When the time comes to address the issue, do so with love and honesty. Speak the truth in a way that invites reflection rather than defensiveness. Share how their lack of accountability has affected you in the relationship, emphasizing your desire for reconciliation and growth. Be patient, understanding that change is a process and that accountability requires both courage and practice. Celebrate small steps toward accountability, offering encouragement and support along the way. Ultimately, accountability is a spiritual issue because it requires humility, a willingness to admit our need for grace, to learn from our mistakes, and to grow in alignment with God's truth. When someone you love resists accountability, it is often a sign that they are wrestling with deeper spiritual battles. While you cannot force accountability, you can pray for them, set healthy boundaries, and model the kind of accountability you hope to see.